Om Namo Narayanaya. Welcome back. Today we are working on chapter 28. Puranjana becomes a woman in the next life. Now we're only going to read part of this. I don't know exactly where we're going to stop. I haven't given it much look, but it's kind of long, and I know I just probably won't be able to do it in a full video. Yeah, probably not, but we'll see. So let's dive in and see how far we go and what this is about. The great sage Narada continued, "My dear king, Prasinabharisat, afterward the king of the Yavanas, whose name is Fear itself, as well as Prajvara, Kalakanya, and his soldiers, began to travel all over the world. Once the dangerous soldiers attacked the city of Puranjana with great force. Although the city was full of paraphernalia for sense gratification, it was being protected by an old serpent. Gradually, Kalakanya, with the help of dangerous soldiers, attacked all the inhabitants of Puranjana city and thus rendered them useless for all purposes. When Kalakanya, daughter of Time, attacked the body, the dangerous soldiers of the king of the Yavanas entered the city through different gates. They then began to give severe trouble to all the citizens. When the city was thus endangered by the soldiers and Kalakanya, King Puranjana, being overly absorbed in affection for his family, was placed in difficulty by the attack of Yavana Raja and Kalakanya. When King Puranjana was embraced by Kalakanya, he gradually lost all his beauty. Having been too much addicted to sex, he became very poor in intelligence and lost all his opulence. Being bereft of all possessions, he was conquered forcibly by the Gandhavaras and the Yavanas. King Puranjana then saw that everything in his town was scattered, and that his sons, grandsons, servants, and ministers were all gradually opposing him. He also noted that his wife was becoming cold and indifferent. When King Puranjana saw that all his family members, relatives, followers, servants, secretaries, and everyone else had turned against him, he became very anxious. But he could not counteract the situation because he was thoroughly overwhelmed by Kalakanya. The objects of enjoyment became stale by the influence of Kalakanya. Due to the continuance of his lusty desires, King Puranjana became very poor in everything. Thus he did not understand the aim of life. He was still very affectionate toward his wife and children, and he worried about maintaining them. The city of Puranjana was overcome by the Gandhavara and Yavana soldiers, and although the king had no desire to leave, he was circumstantially forced to do so, for it was smashed by Kalakanya. Under the circumstances, the elder brother of Yavana Raja, known as Prajvara, set fire to the city to please his younger brother, whose other name is Fear itself. When the city was set ablaze, all the citizens and servants of the king, as well as all the family, sons, grandsons, wives, and other relatives, were within the fire. King Puranjana thus became very unhappy. The city's superintendent of police, the serpent, saw that the citizens were being attacked by Kalakanya, and he became very aggrieved to see his own residence set ablaze after being attacked by the Yavanas. As a serpent living within the cavity of a tree wishes to leave when there is a forest fire, so the city's police superintendent, the snake, wished to leave the city due to the fire's severe heat. The limbs of the serpent's body were slackened by the Gandhavaras and Yavana soldiers, who had thoroughly defeated his bodily strength. When he attempted to leave the city, he was checked by his enemies. Being thus baffled in his attempt, he began to cry loudly. King Puranjana then began to think of his daughters, sons, grandsons, and other relatives, his servants and associates, as well as his house, his paraphernalia, and his little accumulation of wealth. King Puranjana was overly attached to the family and conceptions of I and mine. Because he was overly attracted to his wife, he was already quite poverty-stricken. At the time of separation, he became very sorry. King Puranjana was anxiously thinking, "Alas, my wife is encumbered by so many children. When I pass from this body, how will she be able to maintain all these family members? Alas, she will be greatly harassed by thoughts of family maintenance." King Puranjana then began to think of his past dealings with his wife. He recalled that his wife would not take her dinner until he had finished his, that she would not take her bath until he had finished his, and that she was always very much attracted to him, so much so that if he would sometimes become angry and chastise her, she would simply remain silent and tolerate his misbehavior. King Puranjana continued thinking how, when he was in a state of bewilderment, his wife would give him good counsel, and how she would become aggrieved when he was away from home. Although she was the mother of so many sons and heroes, the king still feared that she would not be able to maintain the responsibility of household affairs. King Puranjana continued worrying. After I pass from this world, how will my sons and daughters, who are now fully dependent on me, live and continue their lives? Their position will be similar to that of passengers aboard a ship wrecked in the midst of an ocean. Although King Puranjana should not have lamented over the fate of his wife and children, he nonetheless did so, due to his miserly intelligence. In the meantime, Yavana Raja, whose name was Fear itself, immediately drew near to arrest him. When the Yavanas were taking King Puranjana away to their place, binding him like an animal, the king's followers became very aggrieved. While they lamented, they were forced to go along with him. The serpent, who had already been arrested by the soldiers of Yavana Raja and was out of the city, began to follow his master along with the others. As soon as they all left the city, it was immediately dismantled and smashed to dust. When King Puranjana was being dragged with great force by the powerful Yavana soldiers, out of his gross ignorance, he still could not remember his friend and well-wisher, the Super Soul. That most unkind king, Puranjana, had killed many, many animals in various sacrifices. Now, taking advantage of this opportunity, all those animals began to pierce him with their horns. It was as though he was being cut to pieces by axes. Due to his contaminated association with women, a living entity like King Puranjana eternally suffers all the pangs of material existence and remains in the dark region of material life, bereft of all remembrance for many, many years. King Puranjana gave up his body while remembering his wife, and consequently, in his next life, he became a very beautiful and well-situated woman. He took his next birth as the daughter of King Vidarbha in the very house of the king. So I'm going to pause here. That's verse 28, because it's now about to go into a story of what happens next. So I said in the last video that the last chapter was confusing to me because suddenly we had this fight with Snake and then this fight vanished from the narration. Well, here it got picked up again and was finished. So we got an answer to what happened. The king fell and the snake lost, essentially. What's interesting about this chapter, though, is the lesson that if you lead a life addicted to sex, you are broke at the end of your life. You have nothing. Sex is great, but it's not supposed to be your life. There is more to life than that. I actually have a friend who's 50-something who literally has spent his entire life as a hustler. And every conversation eventually will turn to sex. Everything he does revolves around sex, and not even nice sex. He's confessed to me he's never had a relationship. Doesn't believe in love. No, he just actually can't, because he's so corroded up here. And he has an empty life with no friends, no lovers, no one. I don't know if anyone really cares about him or if they're just nice to him, because you should be nice to your fellow people even if you don't really necessarily care about them. And it's just, he gets used a lot and abused, and he has nothing. And I know now in his 50s he's trying to do things with his life, trying to make some money, trying to do something, but it's all just garbage. It's just sex, and it's just nasty. And that's what happens. If you make sex your life, you don't come out the other end going, stud muffin. You don't come out as Fabio. You come out as nothing. Emptiness. Emptiness solidified. I've known others like this who were just sex. That's all their life was. And they literally had nothing. I knew someone who died who literally was getting it on all the time with anyone who would look at her. And I had the opportunity to go through her stuff when she passed away, and it was just nothing. It was very, how do I say this? I want to say it was like just a trip to the Goodwill. Because there was very little there that really had meaning, because there was nothing in her life that had meaning other than the people she would screw around with. And it was so sad to think that someone had just wasted their life away, that there was just nothing here that she had really done or finished or whatever. And we see that here in this story, just showing us that this life, it's just not good. It's just not a good life. Now, I don't mean to sound like a prude. I know that may be what I'm sounding like. I am not anti-sex. I love sex. I just believe at my age that sex should be this amazing thing with a person you love, and it should actually create a great life. I also believe that, it's not the only thing to do. There's a lot of other things to do that are just as fulfilling. And it's finding that balance. Or maybe it's finding a balance between celibacy and fulfillment. But then if you're celibate, I know too many people who are celibate, not necessarily by choice, and they go around just miserable. Oh, I want a woman. Oh, I'm so desperate. Oh, and so they're living in the other end, where it's instead of too much sex, they're not getting enough. So I totally encourage having sex. I think it's great. I think it's wonderful. If you meet that person who the sex is amazing, you're going to know it, and you're just going to realize what I'm saying. It's going to be mind-bending. I think society wants us to be animals. I think society is pushing us to just having sex all the time. They want us to have the mentality of the friends I've just mentioned, or acquaintances really. They want us to be animals who just are consumed by sex, because then we will be empty. And if we are empty, we are easy to control. If we never read a book or never watch the news, we are not smart, won't know what's going on, and when the government comes in and tells us something that's not very good for our long-term or short-term benefit, but they say it is, we'll believe them, because we have nothing going on up here. We're also more likely to be depressed. We're more likely to be mentally a bit off. I mean, think about it. If you're in your 50s and you've literally been a hustler your entire life, you have no relatives you talk to, you have no friends, no relationships, sex is like, oh, it's been 5 minutes, okay, and that's about the best you've ever had, you don't really know how to react to people, and you become sick in the mind. And when you're sick in the mind, you're easily malleable at the hands of others. And the government knows this. And big society players know this. And that's exactly what they want. They want us malleable, because then they can hang a carrot up and go, look at what I got, look at what I got. This will fix all your problems. Except it doesn't, and it won't, and we'll sacrifice even more. But that's okay, because someone's going to get rich off our back. And we're just going to be a pawn in a game while someone gets rich. You know what I mean. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is well documented. I even saw something the other day, a document written in 1979, I believe, where it was actually said that homosexuality should be encouraged for as many folks as possible to prevent children happening and to prevent families from being created, because it's harder to control society with families. It was also said in this document that mental illness should not be cured, because sick people are more likely to do things, and they're more likely to live in fear, and fear will cause them to work against their best instincts. And fear makes people do things that maybe aren't good for them. And that's what the government wants. Also, when you live in fear, you're more likely to believe propaganda. So literally, I've seen it in a document. I'm not going to cite the document. It doesn't really matter. You've probably seen them, and by the time you see this video, there may be other documents out there. That is literally saying we need a sick society because we can control it. That's what we need, sick society. And I truly believe that. And the outcome has been predicted by this book, written however long ago. That if your life is all, yeah, at the end of the day, your kingdom will fall. Feel free to comment on anything I've said down below. And until next time, take care of yourselves. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.